Yo, what's good, my great sages? It's your host Sage Decent right here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're bringing y'all a new What If, this being the What If movie to What If Asta had all for one. Thank you to the person who ended up commenting this video down below, and thank you to all you guys for tuning into this What If. Hopefully you guys do enjoy. And for any of my other great sages that are out there that have their own What If ideas, then please comment down below. I will read your comment, and I will potentially end up making the What If, even if it's not immediately. Now, if you guys understand all that, thank you very much. Now, with that being said, it's your host Sage Decent right here, and let's get started.
You're never gonna make it, you're not good enough. There's a million other people with the same stuff. You really think you're different, man, you must be kidding. Think you're gonna hit it, but you just don't get it. It's impossible, it's not probable, you're irresponsible. Too many obstacles, you gotta stop it, yo. You gotta take it slow, you can't be a pro. Don't waste your time no more. Who the fuck are you to tell me what to do?
To begin the What If, let's start out with Asta's origins. Dating way back, and I mean all the way to the point where Asta will be left at an orphanage, it will say that Asta, instead of being left at the orphanage of Hodge Village, he will instead be left at the orphanage of the royal capital. As you see, literature in this timeline had thought it would be much safer for Asta to be in the royal capital, even though there's that bias between commoners and nobles. At least there, he will be protected by magic knights and even the wizard king, as he looks after all the people of the royal capital. As you see, we will see Asta growing up here and living a totally different life. As at least over there at Hodge Village, he'll be happy, surrounded with people that, even though they have their own sense of pity for Asta for having no magic in the original timeline, at least he will still end up being happy with them since every single one of them had cared in their own way. But here, no one cared for Asta. Instead, he was practically left to fend for himself once he got at the ripe age of understanding language and being able to walk by himself. As after understanding those key fundamentals, Asta was basically left to fend for himself in the streets of the royal capital. Not that he really minded. As you see, going throughout the streets of the royal capital, Asta was actually able to see exactly how society seems to work. Because if you're a noble, you're treated with respect, and not only that, but you're pretty much at the higher chart of the food chain. But if you're a commoner, you're a nobody. You're basically trash, no, even lower than trash. And what made it even worse for Asta is the fact that he had to face this with a first-hand experience. As legit, thanks to the fact that Asta is a commoner and an orphan, he's pretty much treated as if he's nothing. Barely any people would actually end up acknowledging Asta's existence unless he had money. But if you didn't have any money, people did not care about you. And nobles were the worst, as every single time they'll see Asta, they immediately begin to just throw coins at him, telling him to do tricks, make them laugh, make them giggle, and overall just treating Asta as if he was some kind of circus freak for their own entertainment. And Asta hated it. He hated the way society seems to just view him, and not only that, but the rest of the commoners, or the rest of the people that are not exactly nobles or royals, as after all, at the end of the day, they're all human, but it seems as if no one really saw it that way. Or more precisely, the nobles and royals didn't see it that way. As Asta continued living his life with these struggles on the daily, as every single time he would struggle against them, but yet keep on moving, as he never let this world and as well as the system get the better of him, as he wouldn't allow them to have the satisfaction of seeing him fail. As Asta continues on with his life at the royal capital, continue hustling and grinding, as he pushes himself mentally and physically to the absolute limit, trying his best to overcome all the daily struggles and challenges that he faces on the daily, until eventually one day it will all change. Cause you see, on a certain night, as Asta was now returning back to the orphanage after finishing his last rounds of work, this is when Asta ends up hearing a voice from the alleyway. As Asta ends up hearing the voice, ends up shouting out a bunch of threats. As after hearing this, Asta ends up heading to the location. He will eventually end up arriving as he sees a magic knight, as he couldn't exactly tell from which magic knight squad it was, but definitely it wasn't magic knight, as the man was currently threatening an old lady who seems to be shaking in pure terror. Now Asta, seeing this, immediately glares at the man, as without any hesitation he tackles him to the ground. As thanks to Asta training his body to the absolute peak that it can be at this point at his current age, this force will be enough to actually end up pushing the man to the ground, as once they're both on the ground, Asta ends up pushing himself up as he begins wailing on the man, punching him in the face as hard as he can. As this will not only lead to the man having a broken nose, but also having a couple of bruises on his face. But unfortunately for Asta, just as he was about to land another blow, this is when suddenly he would then be punched in the face by a ginormous rock fist, as Asta ends up getting sent flying and crashing into a wall, as this actually makes him bleed a little bit from the head. The man ends up getting up as he begins shouting out a bunch of curses, cursing out Asta's existence practically, as he begins to actually ask Asta how dare he even attack him. But you see, even though the man was cursing out Asta still ends up getting up, and even though he was pretty badly wounded, he didn't care about any of that as he tells the man that it was not right to pick on others. But yet the man, after hearing this, couldn't believe that this commoner was saying this to him. As this is when he then says that he has enough of Asta's rambling, as he says that he was going to enjoy the next part. As this is when the man then creates a bunch of earth shards that he was going to send at Asta, ready to do some fatal damage. And yet, even though he was being currently right now surrounded by a bunch of dangerous and sharp earth shards, Asta would still end up staring at the man with a glare, still being bloodied and beaten as he showed no fear at all. As after all, growing up in the royal capital and having to struggle on the daily had caused Asta to learn how to be brave, to learn how to be strong. As even though Asta was facing certain death in the face at this very moment, he still showed no fear. As this is when Asta would then suddenly boldly declare that he wouldn't die until he kicks this man's ass and make him pay for what he was about to do to the old lady. As after hearing this, the Magic Knight just completely lost his shit as he tries to attack Asta with the intentions of killing him, with Asta preparing for any damage that was about to be inflicted. But this one suddenly all the attacks will then be stopped, as they'll all be stopped by a time sphere. As this is where we then turn our attention to the old lady. As currently right now, she will be sticking out her hand, as this is when we then hear the voices of Julius, as we see the old lady then drop her transformation to reveal the Wizard King. This ends up shocking both the Magic Knight and Asta, as the Magic Knight, finally realizing what he had done, begins to try to explain his actions, but unfortunately, Julius does not give him the opportunity, as he just simply puts the man into a time sphere, as he already tried to prepare for his punishment later on. But for right now, he decided to turn his attention onto Asta, as he begins telling Asta that what he did right there was actually an incredibly brave act, as well as a strong one too. As after hearing this, Asta will be all flustered and everything, considering the fact that he barely receives any compliments, but still nonetheless he accepted them. As after that, Asta had just simply planned to leave and just finish up the rest of his day, but this is when Julius then stops Asta as he begins to ask Asta what exactly are his dreams and ambitions. And while Asta was very confused as to why the Wizard King wants to know about this, he still ends up explaining it nonetheless. As he begins to explain to the Wizard King that he wants to actually end up changing the way society views commoners, as he also wants to fix the flawed system. As after hearing this, Julius will be very amazed by Asta's determination, as well as his goals and ambitions. As this is when Julius then smiles, as this is when he then begins to actually make a decision that will change the fate of Asta's entire story. As this is when he then asks Asta if he wants a job, to which Asta, after hearing this, then raises one eyebrow. As this is where we then have a time skip. Following the events after that day, we see Asta going through some very harsh training, as I mean both physically and mentally. As you see, after that day, Asta would actually be training to become a Magic Knight, as the job that Julius had actually offered for Asta is to become a Magic Knight, to which Asta had explained to him that he couldn't considering the fact that he was way too young. He didn't even have his grimoire. But Julius ends up explaining to Asta that he will end up getting the proper amount of training, as he will make sure to have someone to provide it to Asta. But not only that, but while Asta is training to become a Magic Knight, he'll be making sure to take care of all of Asta's expenses. Now, Asta at first was very reluctant about this, as after all, he didn't want anyone to pity him. But to his surprise, Julius did not pity Asta at all, as instead he ends up telling Asta that he can just pay him back by serving this kingdom well, and making sure to protect it. As truth be told, Julius could sense the potential from Asta, as from the very moment that he met him and he saw the boy in action, he saw the unbridled amount of potential, as Asta, even though he hadn't unlocked magic at that point, he was still filling to the brim with it, as even though it was very well hidden, Julius can end up sensing it. He sensed a ginormous amount, as he wondered if Asta had maybe even more than him, as he literally saw Asta growing up and becoming stronger with every following day that went by, as Asta continued pushing himself to the absolute limit of his abilities. And it got even better for Asta once he finally got his grimoire, as although the very shock of getting Asta's grimoire was surprising, the real shock was because of the fact that the grimoire was so thin, as the grimoire was only one page. Yet even though it was only one page, Asta was able to find a way to make use of it. As thanks to all the training that he gotten, Asta was actually able to read his grimoire quite clearly, as this allowed him to actually find out the name of this one spell that he had. All for One. as it gave Asta the ability to steal away magic. And you see, after finding out about Asta's ability, he would be very impressed by it, but he was not the only one. Julius was straight out excited about it, as he wondered what exactly Asta could do with it. By magic, did it need to be a certain type of magic, or did it mean all types of magic? Pretty much, Julius would be a generous nerd about the whole thing, asking Asta a bunch of questions, to which Asta had responded as much as he could. But still though, Asta will be using this ability to the fullest, but he will be using it the right way. As although Asta can get stronger by simply stealing magic from everyone around him, Asta decides to only steal it from people that are bad, or people who are no longer deserving of it. As throughout the following months, Asta will actually end up getting magic from prisoners from the Clover Kingdom. As every single one of them that would appear there for a very certain amount of reasons, Asta will end up stealing magic from them. As this allowed Asta to get 4 elemental magic, this being wind, fire, water, and earth. But basic elemental magic was not the only magic that Asta took, as he even took one unique one, this being chain magic. As Asta had gotten it from Rechi after he got fired from the Purple Orcas for suspicious activity. So this actually allowed Asta to now end up gaining chain magic. But that's not even the craziest thing about Asta's ability though. Because you see, thanks to Asta adding these magic affinities to his arsenal, this actually allowed Asta's grimoire to undergo quite a few transformations. As all the spells that these people that Asta stole magic from had, they end up getting added to Asta's grimoire, causing it to grow in size and causing it to have multiple pages, with each one of them having their own section. But what's probably the best part about this is actually the fact that Asta could actually end up creating his own spells, causing more pages to be added into the grimoire. As thanks to Asta gaining these affinities, he's actually able to create his own spells depending on how he sees fit, or depending on the situation. This allows Asta's grimoire to gain even more pages and allowing them to increase. And this is only ignoring the spells that Asta hasn't even unlocked yet. So already, Asta was already shown to have the potential to become one of, if not the most powerful person in the entire Clover Kingdom. And Julius was very proud and very excited at the prospect of that. As this is where we now turn to the present timeline. Because you see, by this point of the story, Asta has actually been deemed by Julius to be an apprentice magic knight, allowing him to take on certain missions as long as they were not too difficult. As currently right now, Asta has not yet to join the Magic Knight squad, but he's already at the level of a Magic Knight. As this will be thanks to Asta pushing his skills to the absolute limit, causing him to be quite a big threat himself, even though he wasn't an official Magic Knight. As Julius will end up seeing Asta complete these missions rapidly fast with perfect efficiency, he would also end up paying Asta, allowing Asta to actually take care of himself, living in his own apartment, and overall just allowing Asta to live a pretty good life, as he's no longer, scavenging around the entire Clover Kingdom, and is now honestly maturing into a man. But this is when it will be finally time for Asta to actually join a Magic Knight squad. As you see, it will be finally time. As on a certain day, we see Asta be called upon by Julius, as Asta would arrive there immediately. And once seeing that Asta had arrived, Julius begins to explain to Asta that it was finally time for him to make his introduction to his Magic Knight squad. As this is when he then gives Asta a mission. As currently right now, at a nearby village, a couple of unknown Magic Knights were actually attacking there, with only 2 Magic Knights from the Clover Kingdom being there to defend it. As currently right now, the Magic Knights defending that village would actually be 2 of Asta's members from his actual Magic Knight squad. So pretty much it will be a good way for Asta to give his introduction. And not only that, but make a pretty good first impression. As after explaining all this to Asta, Asta would nod his head as he then rushes there to the location to save his soon-to-be teammates. As this is where we then change scenes. As currently right now, we turn our attention to Magma's village. As currently right now, we see both Magma and Noelle being put in a tight spot. As in this timeline, unfortunately, Magma is all by himself right now, so that means that he has to face off against Heath as well as the rest of his men all by himself. And although Magma was strong in his own, rightfully powerful way, unfortunately he was not strong enough to be, taking on a 5v1. So right now, Magma was standing on his last legs. And not only that, to make it worse, Noelle was honestly trying her hardest to maintain the Sea Dragon's cradle, but unfortunately it was slowly but surely losing form. And not only that, but it was slowly but surely getting weakened. Just when it seemed as if hope was about to be lost, as Magma stands up to do his final stand, this is when suddenly flaming arrows would then suddenly end up appearing just as Heath was about to send off his next attack. As these arrows interrupt Heath's attack and cause them to explode upon contact, causing Magma to be unharmed. As this will be when Asta would then arrive at the scene. Asta will be standing there with a cold and stoic facade as he ends up telling Magma that everything was going to be fine now, as he was reinforcements. Now Magma looks at Asta surprised, but still nonetheless nods his head, as this when suddenly the smoke would then suddenly settle down, finally revealing who Asta was to Heath as well as the rest of his men. Now Heath begins to ask Asta why exactly he was protecting these guys, but unfortunately Asta was not going to be answering his questions. To which Heath sighs, saying that he was wasting even more time as he tries to fight Asta and just simply defeat him. However, to the surprise of everyone, Heath stood no chance against Asta, as all his attacks against Asta will be pointless, as Asta would be able to melt them, dodge them, or simply just destroy them, as no matter how hard Heath tried, Asta will be way too strong for him. Eventually began to get ridiculous as Heath calls upon his other men to help out, but unfortunately even they stood no chance against Asta. As this will go on for quite a while, going back and forth, Asta then decides to end it, as this is when he then releases a dragon flame bomb, as this was one of the techniques that Asta had created. As multiple dragon heads would then suddenly end up shooting off from Asta's back, as they'll be shooting out like missiles as they immediately hit Heath as well as the rest of his men, causing a ginormous explosion to form. As after that we would then see both Heath as well as the rest of his men currently down on the ground, as they were all unconscious, currently right now writhing on the ground in pain. As this is when Asta ends up looking at them coldly, all the while everyone else just looks on in shock and in respect. As this is where we then change scenes. After that, Heath as well as the rest of his men were then captured, as he tried one last time to activate his magic, but just as he was doing so though, this is when Asta would then put his hands on Heath's forehead. As this is when, to Heath's surprise, he would then feel himself begin to get weaker and weaker, and to the surprise of everyone, Heath's grimoire begins to slowly but surely end up frizzling away from existence, until eventually it was just completely gone. Heath ends up looking around surprised. He's now currently right now at his most weakest state, as he begins to ask Asta what he did, only to be surprised as Asta's grimoire would then appear, as right now it would be looking like an entire dictionary, as this is when more pages would then be added. Now this will surprise and confuse everyone, but before they can get to questioning Asta, Asta begins to interrogate Heath as well as the rest of his men. Unfortunately though, this does not last long, as Heath and his men immediately begin to pull a kamikaze and just end themselves immediately, as they did not want to reveal any information. This will surprise everyone as they couldn't believe how hardcore, these guys were, but at the end of the day it didn't really affect Asta too much since he got the magic from Heath. And not only that, but Heath was scum, as this is when Asta then turns his attention to Magma as well as the rest of the villagers, as currently right now they were all surrounding an old man that was actually dying. Or should I say already had died at this point. As this is where we then change scenes to once the man is actually buried and once Magma ends up paying his final respects. As after that, the Black Bulls end up heading off back to their base along with Asta, as they begin to actually ask Asta why exactly he was there and also who he was, as Asta begins to explain pretty much the whole situation. Now once they end up arriving back at the Black Bulls base, the entire situation has been explained to both Noel and Magma, as both of them will be very surprised as they couldn't believe that someone so strong was actually joining the Black Bulls. As with Asta's power, he should definitely be in one of the more higher tier Magic Knight squads. Heck, he should probably be in the Golden Dawn. But yet Asta had been chosen to be part of the Black Bulls. And although they had their own questions as well as theories for why Asta was part of the Black Bulls, unfortunately right now they couldn't answer any of them. As just before they enter the Black Bulls base, this is when Magma would then suddenly remember something, as pulling something out of his bag. This is when he actually ends up giving Asta the Black Bulls robe. Asta ends up looking at it confused as he didn't ask Magma if he needs to work for it, only for Magma to shake his head, as Asta had already shown him back at the village that Asta was already plenty of man enough to wear that Black Bull's robe, and more than enough deserving. As Asta after hearing this then nods his head as he puts on the Black Bull's robe before entering in there as he makes his introduction. As we now do a little bit of a time skip. After that following day, Asta actually ends up integrating into the Black Bulls quite nicely, as pretty much every single one of them end up treating Asta quite kindly, and after finding out everything that Asta did back at the village, they immediately have even more respect towards Asta. And this also includes Yami as well, as after finding out what Asta did for his crew as well as also reading Asta's key, his respect for Asta is actually way higher than the one in the main timeline. Mostly because of the fact that he could already tell that this Asta went through his own fair share of struggles and was always able to come out on top no matter what, and was someone that didn't seem like he was going to give up easily. So thanks to that, Yami as well as the rest of the Black Bulls had taken a liking to Asta, as now we can continue on with the story, all the way to the dungeon exploration arc. as this will start off the exact same way as it does in the main timeline, as Julius ends up calling upon Asta as well as the rest of Black Bulls to do a mission, with him specifically requesting Asta to be a part of it. The same team will end up being formed, this being Asta, Noel, and Luck, as Luck wanted to go there and also because Yami had told him to go there, and Noel had to go there because she needed more experience. And not only that, but she unknowingly wants to get closer to Asta, as similar to the main timeline, she has a crush on Asta in this one. As now that the team was formed, we can now continue on with the story all the way until they arrive at the dungeon, as we see similar events like the main timeline playing out, with Luck setting off a bunch of traps and Asta being there to counter every single one of them, with the main reason behind this being the fact that Luck wants to find out Asta's capabilities, since still Asta's magic has been completely unknown to everyone around him, as the only thing they can tell is the fact that Asta is very powerful, especially since he has a ginormous amount of magic. As Luck begins to continue setting off more and more traps, all the while Asta takes care of it with a little bit of fire magic, which makes Luck think that that's Asta's magic. But right as he was about to set off another trap though, this is when he then stops as he senses a fight going on. Asta senses the same thing, as just when he was about to tell Luck to stop, unfortunately Luck didn't listen to him as he heads off by himself, leaving both Asta and Noel by themselves. As Noel begins to go on a rant about Luck leaving them by themselves, this is when she then falls into another trap accidentally, causing it to activate. Luckily, Asta will be there to stop it immediately, but you see, just as Asta had destroyed the trap with a fire arrow, a wind arrow will also pierce through the air to try intercepting it. As this is when suddenly we end up seeing the arrival of the Golden Dawn. Now we see the two teams interact with each other, as Noel and Mimosa had a very complicated relationship, mostly because of the fact that Noel had her own insecurities and thought that Mimosa was being condescending with her. All while Asta, Yuno, and Klaus had a very different interaction compared to the one that they had in the main timeline. Since Asta in this timeline was not raised with Yuno, so that means that they were complete strangers. All the while Klaus will remain the same way, as he begins to explain that it was impossible for the Wizard King to call upon the Black Bulls. But Asta did not really care about what Klaus had to say, as he simply walked off, as he calls for Noel to continue on since they have a mission to complete. As hearing and seeing this lack of reaction from Asta would actually cause Klaus to be even more upset, as this is when he actually begins to ask Asta if he truly believes that the Black Bulls can complete this mission, to which Asta had no response for him at all, since he truly did not care what Klaus had thought or what he had to think at all, since after all this was a job to him that he needs to complete. And after seeing that Asta was once again not responding to him, this is when Klaus then proposes a challenge. As in Klaus's own mind, he believes that the Black Bulls were looking down on the Golden Dawn, even though they were the worst of the worst. As Asta, after hearing that challenge, once again ignores Klaus and just continues on with Noel, as this is where we then change scenes. As we now turn to when Asta and Noel end up arriving at the area where we see Luck defeated, after he fought off against the Diamond Kingdom's, mage. As Luck is currently right now laying down on the ground, he would eventually end up getting up thanks to both Asta and Noel, as he tries to rush after the mage once again, only to be stopped by both Noel and Asta, as he begins to talk Luck out of it and actually remind him what exactly he's fighting for, giving him a similar speech to the one in canon. As after hearing that speech, Luck ends up calming down and apologizing to both Asta and Noel, as soon after taking care of that, they'll then end up rushing over to where the treasure room was. As just as they end up arriving, similar to the main events like in the main timeline, they end up seeing Mars defeating the Golden Dawn team, as they are currently right now standing on their last legs, with Yuno being the last one to defend them. As Yuno will be trying his best to face off against Mars, this is when Asta then decides to run in to interrupt an attack that Mars had threw at Yuno, this being a ginormous mineral blade, to which Asta ends up shattering it by swinging out some chains. Now after seeing these chains, Mars ends up turning his attention onto Asta, as this is when Asta begins to release his magic pressure, really showing everyone just how strong he really was. As this ended up causing Klaus, who was watching the whole thing, to actually gasp a little bit, since he couldn't believe that such a powerful amount of mana was actually contained within one of the members of the Black Bulls. As Asta, after making sure that everyone else was fine, and also telling the rest of his teammates to make sure that they were alright, this is when Asta then decides to face off against Mars. As after seeing Asta, Mars ends up commenting that Asta is strong, but not compared to him, to which Asta just scoffs at that. As this is where we then see the fight between Asta and Mars, and similar to the main timeline, the outcome would remain the same, with Mars being defeated by Asta. But in this timeline, it will be much more of a spectacular, as everyone will watch as Asta ends up facing off against Mars and beating him senselessly with ease, as Asta in this timeline doesn't even get injured by Mars, since he was already trained at such a young age. As literally Klaus watching the entire thing cannot believe it, as he senses Asta's magical pressure, as Asta had magic levels so high that he even surpasses Mars and Klaus and pretty much almost every single member of the Golden Dawn. As this made Klaus wonder why exactly did the Black Bulls actually hide such a member until now. As we turn back to the fight between Asta and Mars, as Asta will be overwhelming Mars in everything, whether it be strength, speed, or just magic abilities or magic capabilities as well, because of the fact that Mars unfortunately was not able to keep up with Asta at this rate. As Mars begins to actually ask Asta what exactly he was, to which Asta doesn't respond to anything, as this is when Asta then decides to end it. Now you see, throughout the majority of this fight, Asta's just been simply using his chains magic, mostly because of the fact that he didn't really see Mars as too much of a threat to use his other arrays of magic. But seeing the fact that this fight was getting a little bit too repetitive, Asta decides to end it, as this is when Asta then snaps his fingers, causing once again Dragon Flame bombs to be released from Asta's back, as they rush at Mars like missiles, with Mars trying his best to stop them, but unfortunately not being able to do so, as it explodes right in his face and actually sends him flying and out of his mineral golem-like armor, and also resulting in Mars being defeated. This erupts silence all around as everyone looks at Asta in just pure amazement, as they had never seen anyone use more than just one type of magic. As everyone begins to look at Asta with the only thought going through their mind thinking that Asta was incredible. As after defeating Mars and after making sure that everyone was alright, they soon end up going to the treasure room, gathering all the treasure, and soon being forced to leave the dungeon, as after all it was collapsing on itself. Mars still ends up getting away thanks to his group picking him up, and another thing is the fact that Mars does not get up from the beating that Asta had given him. So that means that there's no Asta versus Mars, match number 2. So with that, Asta ends up escaping out of the dungeon, as Klaus would actually end up apologizing to Asta and the rest of the Black Bulls. Unlike in the main timeline where he would apologize to Yuno as well, in this timeline he just purely, apologizes to Asta and Noel, since he mostly just disrespected them. Which Asta just tells him that he simply does not care about any of that, but does tell Klaus to watch that behavior. As now with that being said, this is where we then see both groups end up going their own ways, as they have to report this back to their captains. And when they do, both captains end up telling them to report this to Julius themselves, with the same thing happening in the main timeline where Luck decides to stay behind. As this is where we then see similar events playing out just like it does in the main timeline. We see Asta and Noel end up arriving to the royal capital, and they soon end up encountering the Golden Dawn team as they decide to report this back to Julius together. And you see throughout the time of the journey, we end up having the same events playing out, where both Mimosa and Noel realizing that they have a crush on Asta, although Noel is very reluctant about it, with the only difference here being the fact that Yuno does not talk to Asta at all, but instead Yuno has actually gained quite a curiosity for Asta as he wonders how strong Asta is, and more precisely what exactly are Asta's origins. As eventually both groups end up arriving to meet Julius, to which we end up seeing another comedic scene, as Julius acts very friendly towards Asta, as he pretty much begins to treat Asta like an old friend and everything, to which surprises everyone, although while Asta continued trying to remain as nonchalant as possible, but deep down he was feeling an incredibly amount of embarrassment. As eventually, after settling all down, this is when Julius begins to find out about all the things they gathered from the dungeon and compliment every last one of them. As after that, this is when Yuno would then ask Julius about what it takes to become the Wizard King, yet when he says this, he actually stares directly at Asta with what Asta can tell could be competitive spirit. As after hearing Yuno's question and after explaining it the best way he could, Julius ends up inviting them to see a ceremony that is happening for 2 more Magic Knight squads, to which they decide to do so. Now the same ceremony ends up playing out the exact same way, as after that they end up going to the banquet, as every one of them was actually invited. And similar to the main timeline, Asta ends up getting boosted up a Magic Knight rank thanks to his journey in the dungeon, as Julius fully believed that Asta deserved it. Now this ends up irritating everyone that was there since they couldn't believe that Asta went up a Magic Knight rank, all while Asta just took it all with great stride and just continued on. As eventually everyone will be there at the banquet, with Asta being there just chilling and eating his food, this is when Asta then be approached by Yuno. As Yuno begins to actually question Asta how strong he was, as well what exactly was his training regimen, to which Asta really did not care about Yuno's curiosity, but decided to answer him nonetheless, as he could just continue eating his food with pausing every single time he takes a bite. As this will continue on for quite a while, all the while the Vice Captain of the Golden Dawn will watch everything, being very irritated with Yuno's actions, as he couldn't believe that Yuno was talking to a member of a very weak squad. But just before he can actually reprehend Yuno, this is when suddenly a scream would then be heard, as Yuno seeing Noel being dipped with water thanks to Solid, her annoying brother. As Solid begins to pretty much explain to Noel exactly what her place was, as well as trying to make Noel feel completely worthless. And her sister will also decide to step in as well to do the same thing. as both of them will be there to insult Noel, as Noel will get even sadder by the second. But as this was going to continue on, this is when Asta then decides to step in just like he does in the main timeline, as he intervenes, but not in the way that you expected, as he just simply dries off all of the water that was on Noel, making her dry it completely once again. As after that, Asta just simply grabs Noel's hand and simply drags her over to his table where he pretty much places her down, gives her a plate of food, and just goes back to eating, acting as if nothing happened. Now, this will end up causing Noel to be very embarrassed, but actually reluctantly and honestly pretty happily then decides to eat with Asta, as she herself decides to ignore the events, although she was flustered throughout the entire process. Now, Saul will be very shocked, but also very upset, as he couldn't believe that this commoner decides to intervene in family matters, especially royal matters. As this is when Saul then turns to Asta, and just as Asta was about to take another bite of his food, this is when the vice captain of the Golden Dawn couldn't stand it anymore, as he decides to wrap up Asta in a sand-like armor, as he begins to berate Asta for his actions. All while Asta would just continue looking at them with a nonchalant expression. Now Saul had seen this, then decides to walk up, acting all cockily, as he then decides to attack Asta using a water-like spear. As the spear was approaching Asta, and as Noel was going to be screaming out for help, this is when suddenly the sand armor would then be suddenly dispersed. And just as the water spear was actually about to pierce Asta, this is when Asta would suddenly do something surprising, as he then suddenly manipulates the water spear and actually just completely overturns it. As if you want to reference from this, think of it as water bending pretty much, as Asta pretty much redirects the spear directly back at Solid. As this would end up causing Solid to have no choice but to block the attack, but also causing him to forcefully kneel to the ground, as he looks at Asta in shock. As Asta, after seeing that he has everyone's attention, begins to pretty much talk the most amount of smack possible, which ends up surprising everyone that actually knew Asta, even though it was only for a little bit. Cause you see, Asta throughout this entire time, he didn't really outwardly express his emotions like that. Well, yes, he kept working out and kept being consistent. Most of the time, Asta just kept a nonchalant attitude, like nothing really bothered him. But this Asta was completely different, as he was literally screaming out in determination that he didn't really care about what they had to think about him. And seeing this would cause suddenly Solid's sister to then decide to step in, as she decides to attack Asta as well, telling him not to get cocky. But Asta seeing this just scoff, as this went to the surprise of everyone that was there. Asta ends up forming out icicle shards, as he ends up shooting them off at Noel's sister. As the sister would be very surprised at this and also very caught off guard, she ends up closing her eyes, expecting for pain, only for her to be surprised, as instead of being, pierced through, getting pierced through by a bunch of icicle shards, instead she would actually end up being trapped onto the wall, as Asta had made sure to kind of pinpoint the location where these icicle shards were going to hit, as he made sure that none of them hit her but instead hit her clothing, as she was now pinned against the wall. As everyone would look at Asta in shock, this is when Asta then asked if there was anyone else that wanted some of him, to which this is when suddenly Nozel then decides to step up, as he begins to release his pressure. Now this pressure will cause everyone to be, gasping for air, as they couldn't believe that the Matching Night captain of the Silver Eagles was now stepping in. But to the surprise of everyone though, Asta then decides to rival it, as he decides to release his own magical pressure, as immediately everyone can feel the difference between the two, as Asta definitely had much more magical pressure than Nozel. But the thing is, Asta was much more wild. Sure, Asta had trained with his magic and had trained to grow to become as strong as he was, but the thing is, Nozel had way more experience, mostly because of the fact that he was much older than Asta. But still, nonetheless, Asta was still keeping up with the pressure of a captain, which surprises everyone as Asta continues increasing the pressure, all while Nozel begins to sweat a little bit as he does the same. As this wound up causing tension to rise throughout the entire room, making everyone wonder what was about to happen next. But right before anything can get any worse, this is when suddenly Fagolian would then intervene, as he calms everyone down, and also tells both Asta and Nozel that the way that they were acting was very unorderly. Now this ends up calming down Nozel as well as Asta then decides to just take his food and leave, with Noel as well as the rest of the Golden Dawn team following along. Now everyone will look at Asta surprised, as Fagolian will be making sure to keep an eye on Asta, since he was actually very impressed, as Asta was able to keep up with the pressure of a captain even though he was incredibly young. As this we then change scenes. We see Asta now currently walking around through the capital, as he wonders what exactly he should do next now that he finally finished his food. As now Asta was actually trying to contemplate what he was going to do next, this is when suddenly fires begin to erupt, as this is when we will then see the Eye of the Midnight Sun first begin their attack, as we see both the fire as well as a bunch of undead begin to spring around in the entire Culver Kingdom. And just as Asta was about to actually go into action, this is when he then hears the cries of a little girl, As currently right now, in a different secure area, we will see Rades currently right now threatening a little girl, just like he does in the main timeline. But before he can do anything bad to her though, this is when Asta would then arrive at the scene, as he ends up summoning out a flaming arrow that pierces Rady to the shoulder. This ends up causing Rady to scream out in pain, as well as yell out a bunch of curses that a little girl should definitely not hear, as Asta ends up arriving, making sure to protect her. After making sure that the little girl was fine, he ends up telling her to run off, as this actually ends up happening just as Noelle will end up arriving around the corner, as Asta ends up telling the little girl to rush over to Noelle, as the girl would do just that. And after making sure that she was a safe distance away, Asta ended up turning his attention back to Rady, who was currently right now writhing on the ground in pain, cursing out a bunch of curse words before suddenly getting up and glaring angrily at Asta. As in a fit of rage, he decides to activate his grimoire and decides to activate a spell, summoning out one of his creations, and one of his strongest ones. But you see, just as Rady had summoned his creation, and right before he can really brag about it, Asta would end up obliterating it by summoning out a miniature tornado underneath the creation, destroying it immediately. This ends up surprising and catching Radius off guard as he looks on with pure terror as Asta begins to release his pressure, as the pressure would slowly but surely begin to grow further and further, as this will make Radius pale, as he couldn't believe that someone so strong had just appeared right in front of him, as this would ruin the plan entirely, as Radius had attempted to stop for time as a way to find out a plan against Asta, but unfortunately this does not work out, as Asta ends up shooting out a compressed ball of wind to pierce through Radius's leg, causing it to be completely obliterated and leaving him with only one leg left. As Radius ends up falling down to the ground, writhing in pain, this is when he looks up only to see Asta that was staring down at him with a flaming arrow prepared, as this made Radius then realize that Asta was going to kill him. As he tries to beg for mercy, trying to tell Asta that it was a bad idea, as this would actually end up causing Asta to pause. Now Radius seeing this would think that he finally tapped into Asta's humanity, although deep down he was only using this as an opportunity to buy time. But just as he was actually thinking this though, this is when Asta would then suddenly put a hand on Radius's forehead, as this is when Asta then says that he has a better idea. As this is when Radius then feels it, his body begins to grow weaker and weaker, as we will see Asta stealing away Radius's magic. As we see Radius' one little thing grimoire then fade into non-existence, as we see a new page then be added to Asta's grimoire, as now Asta has successfully stolen the magic of Radius. As now that Asta has stolen away Radius's magic, all the zombies that are currently walking around the Clover Kingdom will end up collapsing as Radius was no longer in control, allowing Asta to now have free reign over them. And now seeing that he was completely weakened by this point, Radius begins to once again curse out Asta once again, as he now was feeling all the pain that he once felt, but this time 10 times worse since he has no magic to reinforce it. As he tries his best to fight against the pain, unfortunately Asta was no longer playing around with him, as he ends up shooting a flaming arrow directly into Radius's head, finishing him off. As this will be the end for Radius. But right before Asta can get a break though, this is when suddenly multiple portals would then appear, as multiple members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun would then show up, as they all face off against Asta. Now Asta is able to quickly overwhelm them thanks to his control over magic, as he uses a combination of chain magic and fire magic to completely wrap around every last one of them and burn them, as he continues facing off against them. Now this is when suddenly Fagolion as well as Leopold would then arrive, as they decide to assist Asta, allowing for every single one of them to be defeated. As once making sure that the enemies were taken care of, Fagolion would actually end up complimenting Asta for his strength, but Asta would actually be focusing on something else right now, as he ends up shooting off one of his chains directly into a pile of undead, of a bunch of undeads, as he ends up wrapping around one of the members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, this being the spatial mage Voltos. As Voltos will be trapped in the chain, he will try to activate his magic, but to his surprise, Asta will end up reinforcing the chain, causing it to forcibly disactivate his magic, preventing him from activating it, as this ends up causing Voltos to not be able to actually transport Fagolion to Licht, as this ends up resulting in their plan failing. As this ends up causing Voltos to end up looking at Asta in shock, this is where we then change scenes. Well, actually no, this is where we do a time skip actually. As moving past all these events, Voltos ends up getting captured and soon knocked out, as they decide to actually search his memory and probe it for later. But just to be safe, in order to make sure that Voltos does not escape, this is when Julius then offers Asta to take away Voltos' magic, as he fully believes that Asta can make better use of it, and also it would prevent Voltos from escaping later on, if he ever gets a chance. And Asta, after hearing this, would agree to it, as he takes away Voltos' magic, allowing him to now have spatial magic added to his grimoire, as more pages then flood into Asta's grimoire. As now with Voltos' magic now being stolen away by Asta, and now that Asta had once again grown even stronger after these events, you then soon see Julius, after probing the memory of Voltos, actually begin to announce about the Eye of the Midnight Sun to all the captains as well as the rest of the Magic Knight squads. Now this made every single one of them understand about the grim situation as they realized that a powerful group was going after the Clover Kingdom, but they promised to stay sharp and actually prepare for it. And Julius fully believed them as he trusts in his Magic Knight group, as after that this is when they all go their separate ways. Now just as Asta was about to go his separate ways though, this is when suddenly he would then be approached by Leopold, who then states to Asta that he is now from now on his rival. As hearing this would cause everyone, every one of Asta's groups to actually look at Leopold in shock, considering the fact that a member from a different and much more higher tier Magic Knight group was declaring a rival out of one of the members of the Black Bulls. Yet Asta hearing this just simply accepts it, as he decides to leave, all the while Yuno continues glaring down at Leopold before he decides to actually approach Asta himself. You see, during the battle, Asta was not the only one that was fighting, as Yuno had also fought against the witch just like he does in the main timeline. And just like he does in the main timeline, he won. And you see, after that fight, it made Yuno realize just how much further he needs to go to become stronger, as just as Asta was leaving, this is when Yuno would then declare to Asta that he was his rival as well. As after the events in the dungeon and after Asta saved and everything, Yuno had realized just how much further he needs to go in order to become the strongest, in order to become the Wizard King. So thanks to that, he actually ends up viewing Asta as a rival. And Asta hearing this was once again very confused, and he didn't really care for it at all, but he still ends up accepting it nonetheless, as after all it could potentially be interesting in the future. As now with that being said, Asta ends up leaving the royal capital, with him growing even stronger, and not only that, but gaining 2 rivals after the events. As this is where we now do a time skip. Following the events after that day, we actually end up seeing Asta training with the new magic that he had acquired, creating new spells as well as making new creations. Now while he wasn't exactly as cruel as, Rades when it came to his magic and everything, he definitely saw the uses in it, as he realized that he could actually end up forming like certain spirits with his magic, as this actually caused Asta to form like different types of spirits, a spirit of flames, a spirit of water. Pretty much Asta was literally creating artificial spirits, pretty much allowing him to grow even stronger, and he was able to summon them out, like he was literally able to summon all of them for corresponding magic, whether it be earth, fire, water, and wind. And not only that, but he was also able to use the spatial magic that he had gotten, as he's able to use it to actually get to locations much faster, allowing him to rack up more missions for the Black Bulls and getting them way more stars. Something that Yami had been paying attention to, which made him actually get even more respect to Asta. As Asta was really the main one that was hustling around the Black Bulls group, even though he was possibly the most nonchalant member, and probably the second laziest, with the only other member being able to contend with Asta and being in first place being Vanessa, as most of the time she just stayed being drunk, sprawled out on the couch of the Black Bulls base. As we now turn back to the present time, we see Asta once again training, as he was currently right now creating once again miniature spirits, as he was actually wondering if he can actually use the portals that he gotten from Voltos' magic to actually summon out these spirits to different locations, allowing them to do missions for the Black Bulls. And also Asta wondered if maybe he can even create an army similar to what Rades had done, as just the possibility of that made Asta even more excited. But right before Asta could even work on it though, this is when suddenly he would then be approached by Finral, as just like in the main timeline, he wanted Asta to come with him to a mixer along with Luck. And just like in the main timeline, they all end up going there. Asta ends up meeting up with Rebecca. He ends up saving Rebecca from a drunk man, to which he just simply knocks him out and takes him outside and acts as if nothing happened. And after that, the day pretty much goes completely ruined, or at least that's what Finral had thought. But for Asta, it actually went pretty well, as him and Rebecca actually hit it off quite well, considering the fact that although Asta in this timeline does not have any siblings and cannot relate to Rebecca with that, although he's actually able to understand Rebecca's struggle, as after all, being a commoner in this world isn't exactly the best thing possible right now. And Rebecca's actually able to understand that fully herself as well, causing the two of them to get along, since in their own eyes they were both people who just continued struggling throughout life but kept pushing. So with that, this actually ends up causing Rebecca to gain a little bit of a crush on Asta, and also make Noelle extremely jealous, as she was currently stalking the two of them. As after the little discussion between Asta and Rebecca will go off pretty well, we will then see Asta and Rebecca go their separate ways, with Asta actually promising to visit Rebecca and her siblings, as Rebecca wanted Asta to actually see them. As with the promise between them now being said, this will actually end up paving the way to the events playing out pretty much the same way as it does in the main timeline, as Asta ends up going there to meet Rebecca's siblings right after the following day, as he'll end up spending the time there, meeting up with Marie, Ghosh ends up arriving and being the comedic relief as he tries to attack Asta, to which Asta did not like it at all, since most of the time he was just relaxing, but still, he was okay with him being attacked. He was not okay with children being attacked. That was not something he was gonna let slide. So obviously Asta had to knock out Ghosh a couple of times to make him stop. As just like in the main timeline, Asta will end up staying over there at Rebecca's place all the way until nightfall. But you see, as Asta ends up staying there until nightfall, he ends up waking up in the dead of night as magic was actually surrounding the entire area, causing him to act. As currently right now, walking through the village will be none other than Neej and Baro. As currently right now, they were here to actually take away the children and actually steal away their magic. But unaware to them, it would actually be the opposite, as instead of them stealing away magic from the kids, their magic would actually be stolen from them. As just as they were about to activate their plan, this is when Asta would then arrive at the scene, as he ends up arriving there, standing right in front of both Neej and Baro. Now this ends up catching them both off guard, but Baro begins to act all arrogant, thinking the fact that just because Asta was by himself, that they will be able to beat him, as he tells Neej to activate his magic. But unfortunately, as Neej tries to activate his magic though, Asta was shown not to play any games, as he immediately counters any of Neej's spells by using one of his own, mostly using fire magic as a result. As this made both Baro and Neej then realize that they were facing off against someone who was way stronger than them. Now Baro ends up cursing, as this is when he then tries to talk business to Asta, as he pretty much begins to explain how much he was getting paid for the entire event, trying to see if maybe he can bribe Asta to letting them go. But unfortunately that didn't work out, as Asta became even colder because of the response that Baro had given him, as he decides to just knock out both Neej and Baro. Now later on, after making sure to knock them out, Asta would sooner or later end up interrogating them once they woken up. As after interrogating them, he found out about their entire plan and also found out where exactly they were going to do it. As thanks to that, he ends up sending away both Neej and Baro to the Wizard King's location. As thanks to Voltos' magic, Asta is simply able to literally teleport criminals away to the Clover Kingdom like it was nothing, as they literally appear at a cell pretty much. So yeah, already Voltos' magic was shown to be really useful to Asta. As after sending them away, we end up seeing Asta turn to the location of where exactly they were going to do their plan, this being the mountains, as Asta ends up rushing over to the location as quickly as possible. Now Asta ends up arriving there as he sees the device that they were about to use on the children, making him even more pissed off as he ends up summoning out 3 chains that he used to destroy it immediately, as he does so without any hesitation. As Asta ends up glaring at the area exactly where they're going to do their plan, he then intends to leave, only for him to then dodge a light spear. As this is when suddenly a portal would then open up, similar to his own, as suddenly stepping out of it will be none other than Licht. Asta ends up looking up in confusion, wondering how exactly that even happened, since Voltos couldn't exactly have his magic back since Asta stole it, and Asta definitely did not open the portal for Licht. As Licht ends up arriving, he ends up explaining to Asta that he's been causing too much of a ruckus here, and due to that, he needs to eliminate him. Although Asta just simply shrugs it off, once again putting up a nonchalant and stoic expression, telling him that he could try. As after both of them had shared a word, this is when the fight between them would then begin, as both of them would end up fighting off against each other at equal footing. As the main reason for this one will be because of the fact that while Asta had definitely much more firepower, as well as much more diversity between his magic, Licht definitely had much more speed, and not only that, but he was able to replenish his magic much faster than Asta, as that would be thanks to the fact that he was, an elf reincarnation pretty much. So due to this, both of them were fighting off in pretty equal footing, until eventually Asta would then get the upper hand. As during the time of fighting, Asta ends up summoning out one of the spirits that he had created using Radius's magic, as he ends up summoning out a portal behind Licht, as he ends up using that spirit to actually end up catching Licht off guard, giving him a wide opening. As Asta will use that wide opening to land a clean blow directly into Licht's chest, causing him to take massive damage, to the point where it was actually nearing critical. As Licht ends up getting sent flying and crashing into a wall, he tries to get up once again as he shoots off a ginormous barrage of light spears, actually going a little bit insane because of the blow that Asta gave him, although Asta was forced to dodge every last one of them, as he even got grazed a little bit, but still not enough to the point where it was life threatening. As this when Asta then summons out a bunch of chains to wrap around Licht, causing his magic to actually grow weak because of it, as now it actually seemed as if Asta was now going to capture Licht. But just as Asta was about to do so, this is when he then has to dodge a beast claw that was coming directly towards him. As this is when we then see Veto, Fauna, and Raya then arrive at the scene, as they decide to help out Licht. Now Asta would be surrounded by every last one of them, as he was currently right now trapped, or at least that's what it seemed to them, as this is when they all begin to try to attack Asta, although while Licht continues trying to recover. Asta ends up actually fighting off against all of them pretty well, but the thing is, they definitely had much more odds when it came to numbers. as this ends up causing Asta to try to summon out the spirits that he actually gotten from Radius's magic. And not only that, but actually make full use of his spatial magic that he now gotten. As this ends up surprising every last one of the members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, as they couldn't believe how powerful Asta was. As this ends up resulting in Asta actually catching many of them off guard and landing some pretty devastating blows, as even though it was a 3v1, Asta was still coming out on top somehow, some way. As this will continue on for quite a while, as Asta was showing exactly how strong he was. But unfortunately, Asta was not able to maintain this lead against them for too long, since after all, although Asta had a ginormous amount of magic, unfortunately his body was wearing down, as unfortunately going up against every last one of them was taxing on him. As Asta would eventually end up having to dodge another beast claw that almost nearly end up hitting him, this is when he would then see himself surrounded by every last one of them, as Lick by this point had finally gotten up, as they all begin to taunt Asta, saying that they were going to finish him off now. And seeing this, Asta then prepares to activate his exit plan, since he knew that he couldn't exactly survive all of this currently right now. But just as Asta was about to escape though, this was suddenly the rest of the Magic Knights end up arriving, as this will be thanks to Finral, as well as the fact that Noelle had called for backup. As once the Magic Knights had arrived, this would immediately end up changing the entire situation, as Veto, Fauna, Raya, as well as Lick have no choice but to retreat, although they all end up swearing vengeance on every last one of them, and especially on Asta, as Lick made it painfully clear as he glared at him as he escapes. As after that, Asta ends up seeing himself surrounded by the captains as they begin to ask Asta what happened here, all while Asta finally had decided to give in as he ends up collapsing down to the ground, now succumbing to exhaustion. As this will end up leading us to the very next time skip. Now you see, after that following day, and after Asta had finally recovered from all the stress that he gotten from the fight, he had to give a report back to Julius about all the events that occurred, as well as what happened between him and the Eye of the Midnight Sun. As he ends up boosting up Asta to the highest rank possible, besides being the Wizard King and also being a captain, as Asta ends up accepting it nonetheless. As after this, we end up skimming through a couple of events, as you see, just like in the main timeline, they end up finding out that the Purple Orca's captain was a traitor, so they end up capturing him. Asta will be the one to capture him in this timeline, without the help of Real, so that means that, yeah, Asta now has another person to potentially be added to his magic. As now that the captain of the Purple Orcas was now captured, we can now continue on with the story. As just like in the main timeline, Julius ends up calling both Asta and Yami to his office, as he basically begins to explain to them that he wants them to hunt down the magic stone, so that way they can put an end to the Eye of the Midnight Sun's plans, to which Asta and Yami would accept this. As now with this part being taken care of, I'm not going to continue on with the story, as I'm going to skim over a couple more events. For the Seabed Temple, not much really changes. The Black Bulls end up arriving there much quicker thanks to Asta. They end up training up Noelle to go to the Seabed Temple, as although Asta could be the one to do it, he actually decides to actually let Noelle do it in this one, mostly because of the fact that he fully believes that she's capable of it. And not only that, but Noelle desperately needed the confidence boost. So thanks to that, Noelle ends up practicing, they end up being Colonel, and after once again going through an inspirational speech as well as training, Noelle ends up landing the Sea Dragon's cradle, allowing them to all go down to the underwater temple. Now when they end up arriving there, not much really changes as they have a little bit of a comedic scene, as right after that they end up heading out to the temple. As when they end up arriving over there, they end up meeting up with the old man, as he begins to play pranks on them and everything, to which they did not find funny at all. But after this, he ends up announcing that they had to participate in a game if they want the magic stone. As after that, this is when he ends up teleporting the Black Bulls into the dungeon, well, everyone except for Asta and Yami, as he fully believed that Yami and Asta could completely just overthrow the entire competition by themselves. As Yami would be there actually being, complimenting the guy for his intuition, this is when they would then watch the scene then play out. Now all the Black Bulls end up doing the same thing like they do in the main timeline, as every single one of them were, giving it all they got. As although they were supposedly the worst of the worst, they definitely had shown their potential. But as this will continue on for quite a while though, this is when suddenly Veto would then arrive, along with the members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. As Veto begins to wreck everyone that was in the dungeon, not caring at all. As this will end up happening with both Yami and Asta being trapped by one of the mages of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. But right before things can turn from bad to worse, this is when suddenly Asta ends up opening up a spatial portal, as this is when he then jumps in it along with Yami, as they end up arriving just at the time when Veto was actually about to attack Noelle, who had just finished releasing her Sea Dragon's roar. As once they end up arriving and saving her, this is when they both begin to release their pressure, as Yami, actually smirking at getting the opportunity to fight along with Asta, he then decides to actually ask Asta to give it all he got, to which Asta after hearing this then nods his head, as he was more than willing to do so. As Asta, after the events that played out back at Rebecca's village, he had trained himself really hard for this. So due to this, Asta was more than confident to take down Veto. As with that, we would then see Veto then get jumped by both Yami and Asta, as he completely overwhelmed with the reincarnated elf. He continued trying his best, trying to overpower him using his beast magic, but that didn't work at all. As with Asta combining his chain magic as well as using other elements, this prevented Veto from really doing anything. As the fight would eventually end up reaching its climax, just as Veto was releasing his third eye and once again was powering up, this is when suddenly Yami then decides to come in clutch, as he decides to activate his new spell, this being Dimension Slash, causing Veto to actually be killed off immediately, and surprising everyone that was there considering the fact that they couldn't believe that Veto, someone who was literally obliterating the Black Bulls group a few seconds ago, was completely overwhelmed by both Yami and Asta, as this would end up bringing an end to Veto. But you see, just as Veto had finally came to an end, this is when Asta would actually try walking over to him and try to steal away his magic, only for Asta to meet a realization. Cause you see, the way that this ability of Asta works is the fact that he's able to steal away magic from others that are currently still alive. Alright, so if the body is dead, unfortunately, Asta is unable to steal away the magic. So this makes Asta very upset as he realizes that he can't get any stronger by using Veto, but he makes sure to keep that in mind. As with that, they end up bearing away Veto's body, and they end up leaving the entire area as they were not able to find out where the magic stone was. As this is where we now continue on with the story. As we now turn to when they finally end up leaving the Seabed Temple. And you see, after leaving the temple, Asta had a lot on his mind as he finally realized that although his strength was good, unfortunately it wasn't good enough. I mean, after all, Yami legit had only one magic archetype, and he legit was able to one-shot Veto. Literally one-shot him like it was nothing. As this made Asta finally realize exactly that he needs to push himself even further. As this actually ends up leading to Asta coming up with a great idea. As Asta then decides to actually end up making a spirit. Yes, I know he already made multiple of them using Radius's magic. But no, he decided to actually combine every last one of the spirits that he created into one. One spirit that fit purely for his own original magic. This being All for One. As thanks to that, by the time they end up returning back and after completing their mission, Asta ends up being there working hard on his new magic, as he continues working harder and harder until eventually he finally did it. After so long of working, Asta had finally created one artificial spirit that pretty much absorbed everything and pretty much was exactly what Asta had intended for his own spirit for his own magic. As Asta would then dub this one spirit being known as Libe. Yes, you heard it right. Libe in this timeline is not the anti-magic demon, but instead an artificial spirit created by Asta. As with this, he's actually able to use All for One way better to steal away magic, as his range, not only does his range increases, but he doesn't actually need to touch anyone in order to steal away magic. As with Libe, he's literally able to do it with a single glance, or pretty much he's literally able to do it without even touching them at all. As this will end up leading to Asta having a much easier time when it comes to stealing magic. As you see, right after returning back to the Clover Kingdom and after giving a report to Julius, Asta actually ends up asking Julius if he could actually end up going to the prison area, so that way he can actually add a little bit more power to his own magic. To which Julius ended up allowing him, since after all, those prisoners had no need for magic after the way they used them. As Asta ends up heading down there, he sees the group of prisoners there, with one of them being the captain of the Purple Orcas. As this is when Asta then decides to test out his new artificial spirit, as he then steals away magic from everyone that was there, making his grimoire increase in size once again. And not only that, but also causing Asta to gain another power boost. As now with Asta gaining another power boost, this is where we can now skim through a bunch of parts of the story. Because number one, the main point of it being the Witch's Forest arc, we're going to have to skim over this one mostly because of the fact that the impact of the story, although quite big, at the same time is taken care of and finished up much faster than it was in the main timeline. Because you see, thanks to Asta having so many amounts of magic and so many of them that he's training personally, that means that literally Asta is already speedrunning this entire arc practically. As when they end up finding out that they need to go to the Witch's Forest, as in this timeline, instead of it being for the fact that Asta had broken his arms, instead they have to go there because of the fact that the magic stone was in danger. As has been mentioned to Julius, thanks to one of his spies, that apparently the Queen of the Witches had a magic stone. So in order to retrieve it, they need to go to the Witch's Forest, which is currently right now being under attack. So thanks to this, Julius ends up sending the best squad that he knows capable of taking care of them, the Black Bulls. So with that, Asta ends up going over there, and accompanying him will be Noelle, and also Finral, and also Vanessa. And the main reason for this was because of the fact that Vanessa, well, she's the only one that knows where the Witch's Forest is. So begrudgingly, she has to go over there. And this is where Vanessa will actually see something interesting, as when they end up arriving there and they end up seeing the forest under attack, as we see multiple different people fighting for their own reasons, this is when the Black Bulls then decide to jump in. As Asta, using the new magic that he found, would immediately begin to change the tides over to the Witch's Forest. As literally thanks to Asta copying the magic of a Purple Orca's captain, and not only that, but using a bunch of other magics, Asta is literally overwhelming everyone that was there. Every member of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, and also part of the Diamond Kingdom, stood no chance, as this made many people look at Asta as if he was a monster. But that wasn't the thing that caught Vanessa's attention though. Cause see, the thing is, everyone else, and I mean more precisely Noelle, who's only been a member for a little bit, and not only that, but she has not exactly really been shown to train too much, she herself was actually making waves of improvement. Cause you see, after going on so many journeys with Asta, and I mean like going on different missions with him, and after asking Asta for tips on how to use her magic, Noelle has actually gotten a little bit stronger than she was in the main timeline, allowing her to put up much more of a fight. And Vanessa would see this, as she would actually see that Noelle is doing a little bit better than even her, even though she had way more experience when it comes to using and manipulating her own magic. As this will make Vanessa feel a little bit self-conscious, and also realize about the fact that Asta and Noelle, as well as any other potential members of the Black Bulls, can very well end up surpassing them, and not only just her, but everyone in the Black Bulls, with the only exception being Yami, considering the fact that other than everyone else in the Black Bulls, he's the only one that's been shown to, always have a generous amount of power, to always be a leagues above everyone else, or at least until Asta had arrived, as even they don't know what would happen if a fight between them would break out. As this entry begins to make Vanessa come to a conclusion about what she should do next, this is when we then eventually end up seeing Fauna end up arriving, as she begins to release the third eye immediately after seeing Asta. Cause you see, the thing is, Fauna has already heard about Veto's death, and even though it's been stated that it's been taken down from another Magic Knight, she knew that Asta was included in this. So thanks to this, they finally realized that Asta is not a threat to be played with, so they decided to just go full power from the jump. As with this, Fauna begins to release the true power of Salamander as well, as she begins to literally burn down the forest practically. Or at least she would try to. Cause you see, thanks to Asta once again growing even stronger, this was a piece of cake for him, as he even summons out his artificial spirit Libe. As with this, Asta literally is able to immediately begin to overpower Fauna's magic with his own fire magic, as both of them will end up going through a very devastating clash. As even though Fauna has the third eye awakened, by this point Asta has absorbed so much magic to the point where now he's literally at the level to the point where he can actually keep up with them even if they were to use the third eye. As Fauna continues trying to release as much power as possible, eventually Asta will end up winning this, as he combines quite a few different elements into his own fire, causing it to grow even stronger and seemingly overpower Fauna, as Fauna would get pretty badly damaged. But you see, this is where we actually end up seeing something interesting though, as after Fauna is damaged, she would then suddenly begin to self-heal herself, as this is when she activates her special ability of her flames, that being the healing process of it. As this will make Asta immediately interested, as he realized that he can actually use this opportunity to take away her magic. So as Fauna once again prepares to attack Asta using Salamander, this is when suddenly Asta will end up appearing right in front of her. And as she tries to, attack Asta, Asta will end up kicking her in the stomach to send her flying. And just as she was in a daze and trying to recover, this is when Asta would then begin to activate Libe. As using Libe, since Libe is an artificial spirit, Asta is able to actually take away Fauna's magic from a distance, as Fauna feels herself growing weaker and weaker until eventually it was all taken away, as she ends up collapsing down on the ground. Now unknowingly to Asta was the fact that when he did this, he actually undid the reincarnation process, returning Fauna to how she once was. But now that Fauna had finally been taken down and Asta had finally acquired her magic, this actually gained Asta the ability to self-heal, as along with taking away the fire magic, he also took away all the spells that were accompanied by it, including the spell of the Flame Spirit, Salamander. As this ends up leading to an interesting turn of events, as that means that now Asta has two spirits, one of them being artificial, that being Libe, and the other one being an actual genuine spirit, this being Salamander. So yeah, once again Asta had gotten a generous power boost. As after this, the rest of the Witch's Forest arc can continue on just like it did in the main timeline. As after taking down Fauna, she finally ends up regaining her memories, and soon after that she ends up having a reunion with Mars. Now Lardros tries to step in and ruin it as he tries to take away the Salamander, but this time from Asta, but unfortunately that fails miserably for him, as he ends up being put down easily, as Asta was not even trying against him. As after that, they end up having actually a little bit of an alliance between the Diamond Kingdom and the Clover Kingdom, as Mars actually wanted to extend this to Asta, since by this point, he has given Asta completely all his respect, as Asta had brought back his childhood friend from the dead supposedly, and not only that, but Asta is just shown to be someone who is extremely powerful and a very capable person, someone you definitely want as an ally. Another thing that ends up happening is the fact that the Queen of Witches actually tries to betray the group, as she tries to kill them off while she has a chance, but that ends up failing miserably, as this allows Vanessa to activate her own spell, this being the Red String of Fate. Now, one thing interesting about this was the fact that Asta wasn't captured during this point, mostly because of the fact that, well, Asta could just easily break out of it if he wants to. But you see, this actually ends up leading to a very complicated decision from Asta, as he wonders if maybe he should actually just take away the Queen of Witches' magic. After all, her blood manipulation magic is very powerful. But at the same time though, Asta can understand that there's going to be grave consequences if he does so. Because the thing is, Asta's not just going to simply steal magic willy-nilly like that, no. Even though the Queen of Witches did try to betray them, at the same time she's literally managing this entire forest. So if she ends up being gone, who knows what's going to happen. So with that, unfortunately Asta does not get the Queen of Witches magic, but he does end up getting the recovery magic from Fauna, which is a good thing. So yeah, there's that. As now with this being said, we can now continue on with the story. As moving past the Witch's Forest arc, this is where we then see an interesting turn of events. As after the Witch's Forest arc, all the Black Bulls actually begin training seriously. And the main reason for this one is because of the fact that Vanessa had motivated them surprisingly. Because see, after seeing how strong Asta was, and not only that, but the growth that Noelle was showing, it made Vanessa realize that if the Black Bulls don't actually push themselves even further, they're eventually going to be left behind by the three of them, this being Yami, Asta, and Noelle. And they couldn't exactly let that happen. Magma and Luck were instantly on board with this, considering the fact that, well, after all, Magma was a senior here. He couldn't exactly let his juniors just completely surpass him. And Luck, well, he just likes to use the excuse of training as a way of fighting. So with that, all the Black Bulls end up training seriously, even Gauche and also Gray, as it will mostly be thanks to Vanessa, as by this point she's completely motivated to become stronger. So this ends up eventually leading to a stronger Black Bulls team. Not only that, but the Black Bulls were also going on missions with Asta, considering the fact that even though Asta most of the time just, minded his own business and just relaxed, whenever he went on missions, almost every single one of the Black Bulls wanted to come along with him, to which he would allow it. As this would end up leading to the Black Bulls gaining even more experience. And not only that, but to also show how strong they had gotten. As every single time they went on a mission with Asta, they would come back even stronger, as well as they also begin to notice even more noticeable improvements, allowing them to be even more motivated. As this will continue on, all the way until eventually it will be finally time for the rankings. As all the Black Bulls will be there at the festival, not much really changes here, as this is when the Black Bulls rankings will then be announced. And to the surprise of everyone, the Black Bulls will actually be gaining first place. As the main reason for this one will be thanks to Asta, as he's been using, missions as a way of training, and not only that, but as a way to test out his new magic. As immediately seeing this, people begin to actually just gasp, and many people think that the Black Bulls cheated, but at the same time, they had heard rumors about the Black Bulls' latest rookie doing a lot of things. As just at the mention of Asta, this is when suddenly Julius ends up telling Asta to come along, to which this is when a portal would then open right in front of everyone's eyes as Asta ends up stepping out, as everyone begins to cheer at Asta's presence. After this, in second place will be the Golden Dawn, and after that, a bunch of other squads go next, not like they're really that important, as eventually Yuno would also be there right along Asta. As so far, just like in the main timeline, both of them were aspiring rookies that are making huge waves of progress, and not only that, but making huge amounts of differences. As after this is where we then see the exact same events actually playing out, as not much really changes with Asta's presence being there. As legit, they still end up announcing the Royal Magic Night exams as well as the hunt for the Adamantite Sun, and not only that, but they also end up having that few months of training, considering the fact that they needed time to prepare. And not only that, but the Black Bulls still end up going to the volcano that Merleona wants to take them, as Merleona was there to help out with Goleon's squad after they became so-called soft. But nonetheless, all that ends up playing out pretty similarly to the main timeline, as Asta is just there to pretty much show off his strength, and most of the time is focusing on training, all the way until eventually it'll be finally time for the Royal Magic Night exams, where Asta being on the same team with Mimosa, Zora, and also himself. As now with this team being said, this is where we then have the Royal Magic Night exams. And I'm going to skim through a lot of these, considering the fact that most of these fights are not really that important, as most of them are just a way for us to show off how strong he gotten, but not only that, but how the rest of the Black Bulls gotten stronger as well. As Asta ends up beating the first team he faces off against, he ends up beating the second team, he also ends up beating Magma's team, and later on eventually he ends up facing off against Longura's team. Now in the main timeline, this is where Asta would actually end up, losing. But not losing, he ends up getting a draw, but still this is what knocks him out of the competition. But in this timeline, Asta actually ends up winning as he ends up defeating Longoros with relative ease. Another thing to let you guys know is the fact that Longoros does not almost kill Finral, so that means Finral has no more life-threatening injuries, luckily. I still am not sure how he survived it in the main timeline. I mean, bro had too many holes in his body that this man looked like Swiss cheese. But let's continue on with the story. As eventually leading up to the finals, it will be none other than Asta facing up against Yuno. And this fight would go pretty interesting. Because you see, immediately when the fight ends up being announced and as soon as the fight begins, Yuno would not hesitate to enter Spirit Dive, as he ends up appearing there along with the Wind Spirit. Now using this, he immediately begins to call upon a Spirit Storm as a way to knock out Asta's team out of the competition as quickly as possible. But unfortunately for Yuno, this does not work out exactly how he intended, as Asta actually ends up reciprocating the attack with his own spiritual attack, as Asta ends up calling upon Salamander, the Flame Spirit. As using this, Asta ends up bringing out his flames as he uses them to actually block away Yuno's attack, surprising Yuno as Asta ends up actually looking at Yuno's new form and nods his head. As not gonna lie to you, Yuno actually gave Asta an idea to do Spirit Dive, so in this timeline, Asta is actually capable of it. As this is when now we can actually see the fight between Asta and Yuno, and yeah, I'm just gonna let you guys know right now, Yuno does not stand a chance, unfortunately. I mean, don't get me wrong, Yuno is strong, but by this point, Asta has gotten so many amounts of magic, and not only that, but he's faced off against so many members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, that by this point, his magic is just simply overpowering whatever Yuno can even throw at him. Now, we do have to give Yuno some credit, as he does try to outsmart Asta, but unfortunately, that does not work out, as literally, Asta is literally able to think ahead of Yuno most of the time. As eventually ends up leading into just one simple beam collision, but unfortunately for Yuno, that does not work out in his favor, as Asta had combined all the elements into one attack as he uses it to attack Yuno, and unfortunately no matter how strong Yuno is in this spirit form, it isn't enough, as unfortunately Yuno ends up being defeated, and not only that, but it also ends up resulting in Yuno's crystal being destroyed, resulting in Asta's team winning. As this will conclude the Royal Magic Night exams. As now that the Royal Magic Night exam is now finished, we actually end up seeing a few things end up playing out. As this time, all the Black Bulls end up passing and actually are being part of the Royal Magic Knights, and after this, the same squads are still formed as they end up raiding the Eye of the Midnight Sun's base. Now the unfortunate thing about this is the fact that thanks to Asta being there to really remove a large amount of components being there, and I mean like a large amount of the magic stones and all the grunts and everything that, well, Licht had planned to sacrifice, this ends up resulting in the unsuccessful attempt to bring back Licht, the original one. So pretty much, Patri is left all by himself. And this pretty much infuriates him as he tries his best to try to find a way in order to break something or find a way to at least, fix this, but unfortunately no matter what he did, Asta had removed too many components from his plan, making him furious. All while Asta as well as Mereoleona and Zora will continue destroying the bases of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, eventually they end up meeting up with Raya. Now Raya, after seeing Asta and Mereoleona, he does not hesitate to attack them on the spot, even going so far to activate his third eye. And this ends up resulting in the fight between Raya and Mereoleona, and to the surprise of Raya, Mereoleona ends up beating him, all by herself, as Asta does not assist her at all throughout the fight. And to make it even worse is the fact that since they don't have the magic stones, and because of the fact they don't have 3 people to sacrifice, they can't do the elf reincarnation, as this ends up resulting in them pretty much failing at their attempt to bring back their brothers and sisters. As Raya once again continues getting barraged, unfortunately, it'll be by the point where he would almost be falling into near-death state until Asta ends up intervening. As just as Mereoleona was about to land the finishing blow, Asta intervenes, blocking her attack and surprising her, as she ends up cursing out at Asta, asking him if he wants to die. However, instead of responding, Asta pays attention to Raya, as Raya feels this pressure begin to set in around the entire area, as this is when Asta will then bring out Libe. At Libe's appearance, this is when suddenly Raya will begin to feel his magic begin to be stolen away from him, as he begins to actually wonder what was going on. Because see, the thing is, by this point of the story, Asta has realized that every leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, this being Licht, Veto, Fauna, and Raya, every single one of them had extremely powerful amounts of magic, and not only that, but their magic affinity was just overpowered. So with that thought in mind, Asta had made it a mission that every single time he's encountered one of the leaders, that he was going to take away all their magic away from them, as he was going to put it to good use. As Raya will feel himself begin to get weaker and weaker before suddenly he's at his weakest point, as by now his magic has been completely stolen by Asta. as now every single spell that Raya has been using up to this point can now be used by Asta, including Lick's light magic. As now saying that he was at his weakest state, Raya would then suddenly end up collapsing down to the ground as he looks at Asta with a glare, as all in his mind he will only be thinking that humans will never change. As now that Raya's magic was now successfully stolen, this is when Asta would then tell Leona to knock him out, to which she would do so, even though she did it not because Asta had told her. As now that Raya has finally been defeated, and not only that but knocked out, this is when Asta then decides to go to Licht. Cause you see, by this point, Licht has been truly despairing at this point, as by now he had lost pretty much all his organization, cause by now all of them are being captured by members of the Magic Knight. He can't reincarnate the elves, he failed to bring back the original Licht, so that means that he's all by himself now. As you'll see, pretty much Licht, or should I have revealed it by this point to be Patri, will be there laying down as he just simply looks up, wondering how did everything turn out like this? More precisely, what did he do to deserve this? As this is when a portal will then open up, as suddenly walking in will be none other than Asta. As Asta will look at Licht, who by now is getting up, Licht will end up staring at Asta before finally he decides to attack him, as by now this was going to be the final clash between them. As Licht begins to attack Asta with the intention to kill, and Asta being there to defend himself obviously, the fight between them will be quite catastrophic, as they literally end up bursting through the very holes of the entire base, as this actually ends up resulting in them fighting in the sky. As Patri will be attacking Asta with everything he has, as he no longer cared anymore, as all he wanted was for Asta to die. All the while Asta will be there to counter every single one of his attacks, showing how strong he had gotten, as while before it was actually a pretty close fight, now it looked like it was pretty obvious, as Asta by this point has completely surpassed Licht. As Licht continues cursing out Asta's existence, this is when he then decides to end it his own way, as he was not going to let himself be killed off by Asta, and let himself be killed off by humans once again, as he actually decides to self-destruct, as a generous amount of magic begins to build up around the entire area that once it ends up releasing, it will destroy not only, Licht, but also the entire base itself of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, killing off pretty much every Magic Knight that was in there, including Asta, who was literally right in front of the destruction. Right in front of the explosion. As Licht begins to look at Asta and begins to taunt him for everything, this is when unfortunately things does not go as planned. Cause as Licht was fighting off against Asta, this is when he would then be intercepted, as suddenly some type of black liquid shaped as an arrow would then suddenly stab directly into Licht's chest, surprising him and catching him off guard. As this is when suddenly Licht's body would then go into a very violent transformation, as this is when we then hear the voice of Zegred. You see, throughout the entire time, Zegred has seen the downfall of Licht, and not only that, but he has seen the downfall of all the elves as well, as he was the main reason behind it. And you see, he originally was trying to do his plan just like he did in the main timeline, but unfortunately it failed miserably, mostly because of the fact that Licht had completely lost all the pieces needed to activate the plan. So being tired of Licht, messing everything up and, kind of being a complete failure, this is when Zegred decided to step in, as he ends up using, Licht's body as the host, as he ends up taking his true form, even turning Licht's grimoire into a 5-leaf grimoire. As now that Zegred had fully formed, this is where he begins to actually explain to Asta, saying that he was a nuisance and everything, that he was going to take care of him. Well, Asta, after hearing this, just simply telling him that he's not going to die until he finally accomplishes his goal. As with that, both of them will end up staring at each other before they finally end up beginning to clash. Now the fight between Zegred and Asta would go pretty interesting, as while Asta definitely had the versatility to face off against Zegred, Zegred's words magic was actually very powerful in his own right. As legit, thanks to that word magic, Zegred was actually putting up a very powerful fight against Asta, who by this point had multiple different types of magic. But you see, as the fight between them would continue on for quite a while, as both of them were trading blows back and forth, eventually it will finally end up reaching its conclusion, as by now, the entire base of the Eye of the Midnight Sun has been almost completely destroyed, and by now all the Magic Knights have captured all of them, so it was meaning that it was finally time to wrap all of this up. As Zegred begins to explain to Asta that he cannot stop him and begin to go on a full-on evil villain monologue, this is when Asta then decides to end it, as this is when he actually begins to charge up. As Asta, finally seeing that everyone else had finally evacuated from the area, this is when he then decides to tap into that power. As he had once seen Yuna done it before, we will see Asta do the same thing, as we then see Asta then merge with his artificial spirit Libe. As Asta and Libe has successfully done a spirit dive, but this one being a complete version unlike Yuno's. As this ends up catching Zegred off guard, and not only that but surprising him, as by now Asta's magical levels were so exponential to the point where literally Zegred felt as if he was an ant compared to Asta. As already understanding how this was gonna go, this is when Zegred tries one last attempt, as he forms a trident in order to stab Asta with it. But unfortunately it ends up failing miserably, as soon as Zegred took a swing with his trident, it will be obliterated by Asta. As this is when Asta will stare coldly at Zegred, who ends up by this point showing a look of pure terror, something that has been unbeknownst to any of the demons in the world. As this is when Asta would then suddenly stick his hand forward, as Zegred would then feel an immense amount of pain. Cause you see, the thing is, Asta's all-for-one ability to steal away magic and everything has been amped up to the fullest. But by now, it's not just simply stealing away magic and everything. No, this is actually literally stealing away life energy too, pretty much. As Asta is literally able to rip apart Zegred's whole life force, allowing him to be killed off immediately, as well as allowing Asta to now have word magic. As Zegred's body ends up falling to the ground, now being completely lifeless as he was unable to stop Asta. As this ends up resulting in Asta winning, and not only that, but allowing victory for the Royal Magic Knights. As this is where we can now continue on with the story. Now that the elf reincarnation has been finally put to an end, and after Raya has been finally taken away, this once again actually allows the Clover Kingdom to actually rest for a little bit. Eventually they end up taking away Zegred's body as a way of evidence to know that there was some demonic activity involved with the Eye of the Midnight Sun, as well as allowing everyone else to know about the existence of demons. But another interesting thing about it was the fact that Zegred's body, although he was gone, the people that was hosting, well, the host inside the body was still alive. This being Patri and also William, as it was revealed that both Patri and William end up sharing the same body. As now that they gained this information, as well as after examining and experimenting on Zegred's body, they eventually do end up finding a way to end up switching William back, or more precisely extracting him from Zegred's body, with the help of Asta of course, but at the end of the day, William still needs to face punishment here. As after all, William still ended up associating himself with Patri, and not only that, but he knew all of Patri's villainous act and still ended up helping him. So thanks to that, unfortunately, William has to face some punishment here. With the punishment here being the fact that he's no longer the captain of the Golden Dawn, as the rank was stripped away from him. As for now, the title was going to be unclaimed for now until someone else had arrived that was a much better suitor for it. As now with that being said, we can now continue on to the very last few arcs of the story. As events will start off similar to the main timeline. As you'll see, in the Heart Kingdom Joint Struggle arc, the Black Wolves will actually end up getting a request from Julius to actually go scope out the Heart Kingdom, as they actually got a request for assistance from them. So thanks to that, Asta ends up forming the same group as he does in the main timeline, as they all end up going there. And eventually, after a little bit of a battle between one of their strongest, this being Gaijin, as well as the Water Spirit, they do end up meeting with Lola Pachika, as she basically begins to explain about everything that has happened with the Spade Kingdom, and not only that, but also her curse, as she actually begs for assistance from the Clover Kingdom, to which they accepted it, as this ended up leading to a 6-month time skip. Now during that 6 months, everyone had gotten the necessary requirements needed to face off against the Spade Kingdom. But you see, while they were training during that 6 months, Asta had actually spent most of that time facing off against the Spade Kingdom by himself. And the main reason for this one was because of the fact that Asta had the power to do so. Because by the end of the Elf Reincarnation arc, Asta was on a new level of power compared to everyone else, as Asta by this point even surpassed the captains, which was saying something, since every last one of them were captains for a reason. As thanks to this power boost, Asta would have an easier time taking down the Spade Kingdom, as he would go from base to base. And it wasn't like he wasn't training either. Asta was always constantly training his magic, coming up with new spells and different ideas for it. And what made it especially useful was the fact that now that Asta actually had Raya's magical ability, this being his copy magic, Asta literally had gotten more and more spells added into it, as that allowed him to gain more elements much easier. As Asta's once very thin grimoire now seemed to have endless amount of pages, as it no longer had the cover. It was just swarming with pages, similar to how Julius had it. If you guys remember, Julius' grimoire literally had no cover at all. That thing had a bunch of pages, and Asta was now similar to that. As legit, it was just never ending. As Asta will continue on with his voyage, taking down the Spade Kingdom and growing stronger and stronger, as by this point Asta could literally take down an entire base with only one word. As Asta's mastery over word magic allowed him the capability to pretty much end a fight before they even get the chance, as one word is all is needed. So overall, Asta had reached the new levels of power to the point where now even the Dark Triad had regarded Asta as the biggest threat, as even they themselves were not really confident that they could defeat him, or at least by themselves. And that was saying a lot, since every last one of them had extremely high class and powerful demons. Until eventually they decided that there was only one thing they could do. As by this point now, after the 6-month time skip, every last one of the Magic Knights decided to help out Asta, as this pretty much was bringing the end of the Spade Kingdom much closer. But you see, just as the Magic Knights were taking care of the rest of the grunts that were still left of the Spade Kingdom, bringing them closer and closer to defeat, this actually ended up leaving Asta alone by himself. Because you see, by this point of the story, Asta is literally known as a one-man army. He literally can take them down by himself. So due to that, he was obviously the biggest threat, the threat that they needed to eliminate. As one day, when Asta's all by himself by this point, as he finally finished destroying another base, as he was now about to actually contact Little Pachika, this is when he would then actually be stabbed by Vonica, as she had arrived there to catch Asta off guard, as she used her blood magic to make a spear to stab directly into Asta's stomach. Now this seemingly surprises Asta, until suddenly Asta then smirks, as he then suddenly ends up disappearing right in front of Vonica's eyes, as she would then be punched in the face and sent flying. As she tries to get up and trying to recover from the blow, this is when suddenly multiple portals would then open up, as suddenly multiple different bones try to pierce through Asta's skin, to which luckily he's able to avoid it. As Asta will be already healing from the blow that Vonica had landed on him, as truth be told, it didn't affect him. As remember when Asta actually absorbed Fauna's magic? Yeah, that was it playing at play right now, as Asta was literally able to heal himself automatically. As now that Asta was finally fully healed, this is when suddenly a portal begins to open up, as Zenon begins to make his arrival known, but along with him will be Dainty, as Dainty begins to explain to Asta that he was too much of a threat to be left roaming around, and that he needed to be eliminated. As seeing that they were all here, there was no way Asta can beat them. Now Asta sees himself now being surrounded by the Dark Triad, members who literally tormented Little Pachika, and not only that, but have been a looming threat to the Clover Kingdom. Literally some of the strongest people currently right now in the verse that they know of. Yet even when faced off against every last one of them, Asta showed no fear at all, as this is when he actually begins to say the same thing that he did many years ago when Julius first found him, saying that even if he were to die, he was still finding a way to come back to kick their asses. As hearing this response ends up surprising the Dark Triad, before finally Vonica ends up laughing before they suddenly end up beginning to jump him. As Asta actually begins to have a decent amount of struggle against them, as we actually see a bunch of memories begin to play about Asta's fight against, well, the members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, as this jumping was actually very similar to them, except much more dangerous. As Asta continues fighting off against them, as they continue trying to seemingly overwhelm Asta, eventually Asta begins to get a good grasp of it, as he begins to actually counter every last one of the members of the Dark Triad with a magic that actually counters them. As after all, with many years of just facing off against members of the Spade Kingdom, Asta was able to find more than one magic that was extremely useful to him that he absorbed. As this ends up causing the Dark Triad to face with the annoyance that they had actually on their side recently, before it was taken away from them by Asta. As the fight between them continues to rage on, with both sides giving it all they got, as it literally ends up turning out so bad enough to the point where literally all three members of the Dark Triad go full on 100%, actually giving Asta some trouble. But yet, even though all these odds were against him, Asta was somehow, someway still end up beating them, as he ends up punching Dainty in the chest, causing him to literally lose a rib or two, and not only that, but he also ends up appearing in front of Zenon and Vonica and kicking both of them in the faces, as he pretty much begins to explain to every last one of them that they can send in a whole army and he still would be able to come out on top. As this just made them even more shocked about Asta's capabilities, considering the fact that any normal person in this situation would have already been killed off, but yet Asta still kept on standing. As not only that, but thanks to that regeneration, Asta was an extremely annoying threat. As this battle will continue on, eventually it will finally end up reaching its climax, as Vonica actually ends up having a smart idea, as she actually ends up putting a curse on Asta, with the curse pretty much stating that Asta only has 1 minute to live. As the main reason why it wasn't instantaneous was the fact that literally Vonica was only able to bring out so much power from the demon, so that was the best that she could do. But still, 1 minute was good, as this pretty much made the Dark Triad smile, as their best attempt now was just to stall for time and wait for Asta to just end himself. And also seeing that he only had 1 minute left to live, he would just simply smirk, as that means that he can finally end up going all out with no difficulties, with no restraint, as after all, his life was on the line. As this is when Asta will then call upon Libe, as they once again do a successful spirit dive, with the dive now being way stronger than it was compared to the time when he fought Zegred, as literally this ends up causing every last one of them to feel themselves begin to grow weaker and weaker, as Asta begins to forcibly take away their magic. Now luckily they're able to gain a hold of themselves as they try to make distance, but Asta was not playing around, as Asta ends up successfully pulling a reversal, as instead of them jumping him, he was the one that was jumping them now. As every last member of the Dark Triad will be beaten down by Asta, as he would be able to dominate them throughout the entire fight, as Dainty would be the last one to get the worst of it, as he ends up getting his teeth knocked out, and not only that, but he ends up getting put into the ground, as he ends up glaring up at Asta while still recovering thanks to Lucifero's power, as he starts screaming at Asta, asking what was he, as in his own mind he believed that it was impossible for them to be defeated, yet Asta had proven him wrong. As just as the Dark Triad had tried one last attempt to fight off against Asta, this is when Asta then decides to end it. As this is when every last member of the Eye of the Midnight Sun would then be hit by this wave of energy, as they'll then feel their magic slowly but surely being stripped away from them. They feel themselves grow weaker and weaker, and their connections to their demons were slowly but surely fading away. As they end up gasping as they try their best to retain their magic, this is when Asta then gives them the announcement, as he pretty much begins to explain to them and announce his true intentions and goals for the future, before explaining at the very end that he will end up becoming the person to rewrite the way the Clover Kingdom is seen, to rewrite the system, and not only that, but to change the way commoners are viewed. As Asta then declares bravely that he will become the next Wizard King. As with that title, everyone will end up looking at Asta surprised, as this is when every single member of the Dark Triad tried one last desperate attempt as they throw their attacks, but unfortunately it was too late, as Asta finally ends up taking away not only their magic, but their life force too, as every member of the Dark Triad ends up collapsing down to the ground, as they now had unfortunately passed away. As Asta would loom over them as he would then suddenly begin to release a enormous amount of magic. Cause you see, now that Asta has successfully absorbed 3 members of the Dark Triad's magic, Asta's levels are now just undominable, bro. Like, there's no way to even measure it. As Asta had truly reached his awakening. As this will be the day that we see Asta finally be enlightened. As this is where we now continue on with the story. Now you see, throughout the rest of the story, eventually the Spade Kingdom eventually ends up falling. And unfortunately, someone else has to be there to rule the place. This one being Yuno. As after all, he would find out that he is the Spade Kingdom's prince, so he has to be there. But he still tries to attempt to become the Wizard King. But unfortunately, that spot has already been reserved for someone. As many years would then go by, with many battles being fought, eventually a new Wizard King would then hold the crown. As we end up seeing Asta then be dubbed as the next Wizard King, as he will be there sitting down on his throne, now being known as the strongest person and possibly the strongest Wizard King to ever exist. As by this point, Asta has achieved all that he wanted, as by now commoners are not treated unfairly and in fact are pretty respected, as they're treated as equals throughout the rest of society, as the nobles and commoners system had finally been teared down, as by now they actually end up seeing each other on equal footing, as sure while some might be richer than others, at the end of the day they were all human. As now seeing that he had finally accomplished all his goals, and now seeing that he finally ends up reigning supreme as the strongest, this is where we now put an end to Asta's story, to What If Asta had all for one. Thank you guys for tuning into this What If. This What If was really enjoyable to make. I had a little bit of struggles here and there with it, but everything was pretty much fine. It was a good experience, I'm not gonna lie to you. There were so many different ways I wanted to start the What If, or so many different magics I wanted Asta to have, but overall, this What If was just an enjoyable experience nonetheless. But besides that, guys, I do believe that I have talked in long enough, so with that being said, it's your host Sage Samurai here, and he's signing off. Peace and have a lovely day.